framework today provides detail on what, as of now, we expect our next changes to be. Firstly, it confirms that, if all goes according to plan, we will move fully back to a level system from the last week in April. At that stage, we hope that all parts of the country currently in level 4 will be able to move out of level 4 and back initially to level 3, possibly with some revision to the content of the levels, and afterwards to levels dependent on incidence and prevalence of the virus at that time. The advantages of the level system, of course, is that it will allow us to let some parts of the country move faster than others if the data supports that. Moving back to the variable level system at that time will also be contingent on us having vaccinated all JCVI priority groups 1 to 9, which, as I said earlier, we hope to have done by mid-April. That matters not only because these groups will be more protected, but also because we believe that vaccinating around half of the population will have a significant effect on reducing transmission across society as a whole. And although we don't yet know exactly how big an effect that will be, we do hope and believe it will give us the headroom to carefully ease restrictions. It is therefore from the last week of April that we would expect to see phased but significant reopening of the economy, including non-essential retail, hospitality and services like gyms and hairdressers. And of course, the more of us who are vaccinated and the more we all stick by the rules now, the faster that safe pace is likely to be. If we all stay in this together, our progress will be greater. As I said earlier, we will set out more detail in mid-March on the indicators that will guide our decisions on levels, as well as on any revision to the content of each level, and will take account of our experience and of sectoral views, and also the order in which we expect those parts of the economy that have been restricted to start reopening from the last week of April. I want now, though, to set out the journey from here to the end of April. We envisage a progressive easing of the current level 4 restrictions that apply across most of the country at intervals of at least 3 weeks, along with changes nationally on education and care home visiting, and the immediate priority will continue to be the return of schools. All of these easings will, of course, depend on an assessment that it is safe to proceed. The first easing started yesterday with the partial return of schools. In addition, universities and colleges are able to bring back a small number of students, no more than 5% of the total, where face-to-face teaching is critical. We will also ease restrictions on care home visiting from early March, and guidance was set out at the weekend. The next phase of easing will be a minimum of 3 weeks later, so indicatively from March the 15th. We hope that this will include the next phase of school return, which will start with the rest of primary school years 4 to 7, and also getting more senior phase secondary pupils back in the classroom for at least part of their learning. We also hope in this phase to restart outdoors non-contact group sports for 12 to 17-year-olds, and we will also aim to increase the limit on outdoor mixing between households to 4 people from a maximum of 2 households, compared to 2 people from 2 households just now. And then a minimum of 3 weeks after that, so from the 5th of April, it is our hope and expectation at this stage that the stay-at-home restriction will be lifted. We would aim for any final phase of school return to take place on this date. Communal worship will also, we hope, restart around the 5th of April, albeit with restricted numbers to begin with. However, in deciding the exact date for this, we will obviously take account of the timing of major religious festivals, for example, Easter and Passover, so it may be a few days earlier when communal worship can restart. And we will seek to ease the restrictions on household gatherings further, so that at least 6 people from 2 households can meet together. In this phase, we will also begin the reopening of retail. That will start with an extension of the definition of essential retail and the removal of restrictions on click and collect. And then 3 weeks after that, as I indicated earlier, so from the 26th of April, assuming the data allows it, we will move back to levels with hopefully all of Scotland that is currently in level 4, moving to level 3, albeit with some possible modifications. And at that stage, we will begin to reopen the economy and society in the more substantial way that we are all longing for. It is, of course, important for me to stress that all of this depends on us continuing to suppress the virus now and continuing to accept some trade-offs for a period, for example, on international travel. But if we do so, I am very optimistic that we can make good progress in returning more normality to our lives and to the economy. I know this is still a cautious approach, which, though absolutely essential to control the virus and protect health, is nevertheless extremely difficult for many businesses. The Scottish Government is committed to continuing support for businesses. For example, provided we receive confirmation of consequentials in the March budget, we will support the Strategic Framework Business Fund until at least the end of June. We will also ensure that when local authority areas move out of level 4, businesses that are allowed to reopen will continue to receive payments from the fund for at least the next 4 weeks as they transition back to trading more normally. We're also considering some form of tapered support for businesses that may still face trading restrictions and reduced demand even as they are allowed to reopen, and the Finance Secretary will set out further details shortly. We will work with business organisations on these and many other issues as we continue to emerge from lockdown. In addition to the concerns of business, I know that people across the country are anxious for as much clarity as possible. I want to give as much as possible today, while avoiding giving false assurance or picking arbitrary dates that have no grounding at this stage in any objective assessment. I am as confident as I can be that the indicative staged timetable that I've set out today, from now until late April, when the economy will start to substantially reopen, is a reasonable one. And in mid-March, when we have made further progress on vaccines and have greater understanding of the impact of the initial phase of school return, I hope we can set out then more detail on the further reopening that will take place over April and May and into a summer when we hope, really hope, to be living with much greater freedoms than we are today. For now, however, the most important priority we still all have is to continue to suppress the virus. And of course, for a bit longer, that means sticking to the current lockdown rules. So please continue to stick to both the letter and the spirit of them. Please stay at home except for essential purposes. For now, don't meet people from other households indoors and follow facts when you are out and about. Please continue to work from home wherever possible. And for employers, please continue to support your employees to work from home. By doing all of this, we will make it easier for children to return to school more quickly, and we can continue to suppress the virus even as we follow this path out of lockdown. And as we do all of this, we can keep each other safe, protect the NHS, while giving the vaccination programme the time to do its work. I know how hard all of this continues to be after 11 long months of this pandemic, but the restrictions are working. The vaccination programme is motoring, and we can now see a firm way out of this. So if we all stick together and stick with it, we are now able to say with confidence that we are looking at much brighter times ahead. So please, for now though, stay at home to protect the NHS and save lives.
Thank you very much. The First Minister will now take questions on the issues raised in their statement. I intend to allow around 40 minutes for the questions, after which we will move on to the next item of business. It would be helpful if members who wish to ask a question were to press the request to speak buttons now, and I call on Ruth Davidson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. After a year where all our lives have been put on pause, there is finally a growing sense that this might be over soon. And while it's too early to declare anything like victory, we are starting to win the race between the vaccine rollout and the spread of the virus, and we're grateful to all who are delivering the vaccine programme. The Edinburgh University study this week, which found that getting the jab can cut hospital admissions by up to a remarkable 94%, was better than could have been hoped. The success of the vaccine programme means it is now possible to start to have those important conversations with friends and family about reconnecting, about making plans, and about getting all of our lives back on track. And we welcome the information that's contained within this statement today, particularly the details on school return and care home visits. However, there is much that is not in this statement. There is nothing for the thousands of Scots who've had medical treatments, tests or operations cancelled about when and how services will get back up to speed. There's nothing for those who've already postponed huge life events like weddings for a year, about when they can walk down the aisle in front of family and friends. And there's nothing about when measures like social distancing will end and we can do something as basic as give a loved one a hug. The statement and the accompanying documents relate almost exclusively to the time between now and the 26th of April, where the First Minister intends to move the whole country to level 3 restrictions, pandemic permitting, which, to be clear, under current rules would still stop people leaving their council area. But there is nothing about what happens after the 26th of April. This isn't a route map out of COVID. It is a holding document for the next 8 weeks. And everyone understands that we might not be able to give people absolute certainty, but they were expecting the First Minister to give them some kind of hope. Many will have tuned in today precisely because they were expecting to receive that. They didn't tune in today expecting to be told to tune in again in 3 weeks' time, and they have a right to be disappointed. First Minister, why won't you let the people of Scotland know the plan to get them fully out of lockdown and back to their lives?
First Minister.
Firstly, on NHS operations and treatments, NHS remobilisation is underway. The Health Secretary keeps Parliament updated on that. I'll ask her to write to members to give a further update on that as soon as she's able to. On weddings, I would hope that as we go into the period after the end of April, we will be able to see weddings with greater numbers of people, although possibly in likelihood still restricted, taking place. As I have always done, I'm trying to be frank with people, I think we can all be much more hopeful today than we have been able to be throughout this entire pandemic, not just because we have evidence that lockdown is suppressing the virus, but that we have growing evidence that we have an alternative to lockdown restrictions that will suppress the virus instead of lockdown restrictions over the longer term, and that, of course, is vaccination. And that does allow us to say that we think by the time we get to April, we can start to open up the economy, and between now and April, we can open up in a gradual and phased way some aspects of the current restrictions that are in place. But we have to balance that with the reality, and it's not a reality I enjoy, and it's not a reality anybody enjoys, that there is still uncertainty. There is still uncertainty about the impact of the vaccination on transmission, although all of the evidence that is now emerging on that is positive. And we need to make sure that we are not opening up while the virus is still hovering and simmering at levels that are too high for us safely to do that. So the further into the future we go, the reality is any dates that we give at this stage are more arbitrary. It's like, putting your finger in the wind and coming up with a date that is not firmly based in the evidence. And that is the balance that we are seeking to strike. By mid-March, we will have evidence of the impact of the early return of schools, and we will have more evidence, I hope, on the impact of vaccination. So by then we will be able to go forward a little bit more and give more detail in that April into May period. This is all going in the right direction, but this is the moment where we have to be optimistic and positive, but also patient and sensible as well. The last thing I want to be doing at any point, the last thing any of us want to be doing at any point this year is going backwards. This must be a firm and sustainable route out of lockdown, and that is what I believe that we are putting in place.